Hey guys, welcome back to the next part of our series. Today we're going to be exploring the Maya interface and how to set up a project. This is the first step that we need to do before we jump into the creation of our characters. And as you can see, this is the interface. Welcome to Maya. If you've never used any 3D software before, let me start by saying that this is going to be a little bit of a rough start because usually 3D softwares, Maya, ZBrush, and all of them are really confusing at first. Like you see this, you see a lot of buttons everywhere, and it can get a little bit tricky. However, I'm going to make it easy for you. So what we have here is a pretty standard 3D interface. What that means is we have all of our menus. You know menus from every single software you've ever used. Up here, we have a lot of tools and shortcuts right here. We have more tools in here. We have measurement areas right here. This is for animations and stuff. And over here, we're going to have some other stuff that's going to be important. We're going to be talking about this shortly. But before we do any of that, I need to explain to you why the 3D world is important and how we're going to use it for our project. The reason why 3D world is important is because it allows us to work in 3 dimensions, X, Y, and Z. These 3 names, you can see them right here, are going to be super important throughout our journey here. Now, I'm a huge gamer, so every time I start a new video game, the first thing I want to know is how do I move in this game, right? Like how can I control the character, right? Well, in this case, this window right here, this gray thing that you're seeing is our window into the 3D world, and we need to know how to navigate it. And it's actually really easy. You're going to use your Alt key, yes, and your 3 mouse buttons. So if you press Alt and your normal left mouse button, what you're going to have is you're going to rotate the camera around. So you can see now I'm rotating this plane around the area, and I can see the plane from different angles, right? You can see that the gizmo, this is called the gizmo down here, it's changing and it's telling me which axis is facing up or it's facing forward in this case. So, for instance, in here, I'm at the front side because this is the C axis. Over here, I'm at the right side because this is the X axis. And if I do this, I'm in the Y axis because I'm looking at from the top. Now, if you use Alt and a right mouse button, you're going to get a zoom right here, like this. Okay? This is a what I call a smooth zoom because you can see that the way everything pretty much comes into the screen is really smooth and nice. If you use your scroll wheel on your mouse, you're going to get this stepped zoom, which is going to give you a different kind of result, but it's pretty much the same. And finally, if you press Alt and you press the little scroll wheel on your mouse, you're going to get this thing called a pan. Now, this is very important because this is going to allow me to move the camera without rotating around the scene in this case. Now, all of these elements, I'm going to be writing them right here on this element, on this little shortcut list. I think I actually messed this up. The right mouse button is the smooth zoom, and the middle mouse button is the pan. There we go. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Now we're gonna do a quick exercise here to explain the main or the most basic keys that we use here in Maya. I'm gonna click this. I'm gonna go here into my poly modeling section. I'm gonna click this cube right here, and you can see that now there's a cube in my scene. This cube is measured at 1, 1, and 1 units, which in this case are centimeters. So this is a 1 centimeter square cube right here at the origin. The origin is the point where everything starts or where everything begins, which is the 0, 0, 0, 0. If you look at the graph, this is pretty much the center point of the graph. Now, I can of course rotate. I can pan and move the cube around, or I can zoom in and take a closer look at the cube, which is great, right? But if this was a character and I wanted to move the character, I need to use a different set of keys. Now, if you've played any sort of MOBA before, League of Legends, Dota, or whatever, you know that the Q, W, E, and R are keys that we use quite a bit. I've used to play those games a long time ago. So those are the keys that we're going to be using. Q is our selection tool. If you click outside of your area, there's nothing selected right now. If I click on the object, now the object is selected and I can start working with the object using a different set of tools that we're going to be exploring. If I press the letter W now, we're going to get this thing, the gizmo. Now, the gizmo is really cool because it shows us the 3 axes in which our cube can move, which are the only 3 dimensions that exist in the 3D world, X, Y, and Z. If I press the red arrow and I move it, I'm going to be moving the cube left and right. And you're going to see how much I'm moving it left and right by looking at this option right here. If you check this out, which is the channel box, it should be on by default, but if it's not on, just click here on the side and you should be able to select it. Sometimes you get like the attribute editor, that's fine. Just click here on the channel box and you should see how many units has the cube been displaced to one side or the other. If you ever want to go back to the origin, you just click here, zero it out, and boom, our cube is back on the origin. So if I press now the green key, I'm going to be able to move our cube up and down. And if I press the blue key, arrow, I'm going to be able to move it to the front and to the back, like that. Now, of course, you can combine, right? Like we can select each individual arrow here and move it to specific points in space. Now, one cool thing about this is we could also figure out like a specific point in space. Like I can say, I want this to be 10 to the right, 10 to the left, or 10 to the top, sorry, and 5 to the front, like that. And that's the point at 10, 10, 5. So again, if I ever want to just zero all of this out, I can select all of them at the same time, press 0, enter, and there we go. Our cube is back on the origin. Now, there's a couple of extra little buttons here on this gizmo. The first one is this middle box right here. It's a very light box that you can press, and this will allow you to do something called free movement, which will allow you to move the cube based on how your camera is looking. Now, this one is a little bit tricky, and I'm going to show you how or why. Let's say I move this cube to this corner right here. There we go. And then I move the camera like this. And I say, hey, I want to move this cube all the way to about here. If I just grab this middle box right here and place it where I think it should be, from this perspective, everything seems to be in order. But if I rotate the camera, you're going to see that the cube is floating in the air. Why is that? Because the free movement, the little box that we use from the middle there, actually does not take into account the actual like perspectives. It takes into account how the camera is looking at the cube. So it will look good from the camera perspective. Like it might look like the cube is down there on the corner, but it's actually not there. So my recommendation, my advice for this first sessions is try not to use free movement. Try to only move your objects using your keys like this. Okay, so that is the movement key. Now let's zero all of this out back here again. The other ones, these ones are quite fun, but they're a little bit more advanced. At least at the first lessons, we're not going to be using them as much. What they do is, depending on the color they have, they block that axis. So for instance, this one that's a green channel, if you click that, it blocks the green channel, and it pretty much allows you to move the cube only in the X and Y axis in a free way. So if you already know, for instance, that this is a chair and you just want to move it around the floor and see where it fits, you can just press that button and move it around. It's pretty handy to place things later on, but at first, again, I strongly recommend you use the little arrows. It's going to be a lot easier for you. Control-C, as always, in every single software, it undoes the last step, so that's it. Now, the E key, it's very cool as well. The E key is the rotation key. This one will allow us to see how the axes of our object will be manipulated to rotate. And there's actually a couple of terms. I'm going to write them on the guide in just a second so that you can have them as well. But what you need to understand is, imagine this is a plane, right? Like I'm going to do something crazy right here first. Like imagine this is a plane, something like that. Okay? Let's give this plane some quick wings. If this is a little bit too much for you right now, don't worry. We're gonna be exploring all of this stuff. So there we go. So imagine this is a plane. This is a very ugly plane, of course. Let's make it a little bit prettier. We're gonna be talking all about this stuff in just a second. There we go. So now, if we check the rotations of this little element right here, we have 3 rotations, X, Y, and Z. The X rotation is this red ring right here. And what it will do is it will move the plane up and down. It's pretty much like if I had a rod coming from the right side all the way through the sides of the plane, and it will allow me to do this. Sometimes this movement is also referenced as pitch. That's the pitch, yeah. This is the pitch. So the pitch will tell us how the object moves like this. Again, I'm using a little bit of a confusing term right now just to make sure that everyone is on the same page. But if it's a little bit too confusing, just remember, X, it's pretty much like this. It will do this kind of movement to the object. Y, which is the next one, is what we call a yaw in the gaming industry. If you've used Unreal Engine 4 or Unity, you've probably heard this term before. So the yaw is pretty much moving the element like this. And as you can see, it's kind of moving it and facing left and right. But actually, it's like if we had like a pole coming all the way down through the element and doing this movement right here. And finally, the last one is called a roll. And as you can imagine, it rolls. It rolls the object. And it's pretty much as if we had an axis going through the object from the front to the back, and it rotates around that axis. Okay? So I needed to do this little plane so that you understand why those names are important. And we have this thing right here. So E rotation. Now, in here, let's add the... it's the pitch, it's the x-axis, and then the yaw is the y-axis, and then the roll is the z-axis. These are game terms, but you don't need to learn them by heart. Just understand that each individual axis will give you a different result. Now, if we press here in the middle of the area, we can move this thing around in every way that we want. What's the problem with this? We'll get some crazy numbers here on our rotations, and it might be a little bit difficult to clean later on. So again, just zero everything out. And same advice as for movement. Do not try to move this from this free movement, and just focus on using the rings right at the first lessons at least. Now the last ring is this yellow one, and this yellow one is pretty much as if we were going through the object looking through the camera. So it's a rotation based on the camera location. So if my camera is really high here, you're gonna see that the rotation is pretty much like a yaw. Sorry, if the camera is right here, the rotation is going to be pretty similar to a roll, but it's not perfect. See how we get some different numbers there? So the yellow ring is always going to be based on the location of the camera. Just, again, keep that in mind. I usually don't use that one that much, but it's there in case you need it. Finally, we're going to have the R key right here. And the R key is our scale tool. Now, the scale tool, same as the movement tool, has 3 axes. Now, scale is one of those things that tends to confuse people a little bit, because it usually makes people think that scale makes things grow, and it doesn't. It just deforms the proportions of each of the individual axes that the object has. So let me show you how that works. So if I were to use like a new cube here, I'm gonna move the cube up here. And if I use the scale tool, it might seem like I'm just modifying or moving the cube in this direction, right? But it's actually not making the cube grow. What it is doing is it's modifying and stretching the cube into the direction that I'm choosing here with the different axes. So just to make sure this is super clear, if I grab this guy and I pull this guy right here, I'm expanding or I'm stretching the object in the x-axis. If I do this one right here is the y-axis, and if I do this one right here is the z-axis. We're going to be using some of those axes in certain objects as we go through the different lessons, but more often than not, we're going to be using this middle one right here, the middle square. That's going to be a uniform scale. It's going to make sure that everything grows and expands in the same direction. So that's it. Those are the 4 buttons that we use the most: Q, W, E, and R. Now let's talk about the project. Okay, so for the project, guys, what we're going to be doing is we need to create something called a project. It's obviously the thing we're going to be using, but in Maya, projects are not only a way to name things, it's also a way to organize everything. And the way you're going to do this is the following. You're going to go into File, Project window down here. You're going to click it. You're going to say New Project. In this case, this is going to be, I'm going to call this, let's give our soldier a name. So let's call this, I don't know, Bob for now. I'm going to change the name later. I'm going to call this Bob Soldier Next Tooth. Like this. Now, by default, your object is going to be saved on your Documents Maya Projects file. However, I actually have a couple of extra hard drives, and I'm going to be saving this in one of these ones right here. So I'm going to save it right here in this directory. You can save your project anywhere you want. And when you do that, what's going to happen is Maya is going to create a series of folders, all with different names, that we're going to be using to store stuff into them so that we can work with all the things that we need. So in this case, we're going to get all of these files. It might happen later down in your career that some studios will tell you, hey, you know what, here, for whatever reason, we don't call our Maya scenes folder scenes. We call them, I don't know, story places or something, right? So if someone ever tells you, just rename your stuff into another name so that the whole workflow in our industry or in the studio works fine, this is where you will rename it. Like maybe their movies are called, I don't know, fragments, or they're called pitches or whatever. So in my experience and the 8 years that I've been doing this, I've never had to do this, but it's an option that's here for some reason, and that's the reason that I've been told. So in certain big studios, sometimes the names will change, so just keep that in mind. Anyway, I'm just going to hit accept right here. And the next thing we need to do, and this is something that you need to do every time you start working on Maya. Usually when you open the same scene, it doesn't matter, but if you're changing scenes and changing projects, this is something that you do need to do quite often. So you're going to go into File, Set Project, and you're going to select the project that we just created, and you're going to hit Set. That way, every single thing that we do, every single scene that we save or image that we import is going to be trying to reference the folders from that specific project. So let's say this little airplane as an example. So I'm going to go File, save scene, and you're gonna see that I'm saving it all in all this road right here. It's very important. I'm saving it on the scenes folder. I'm gonna call this airplane model. There we go. Now, there's two ways to save a Maya scene. You can save this as a Maya ASCII or as a Maya binary. I strongly recommend you save as Maya ASCII. This should be compatible with different versions of Maya. So if you need to go back to an older version of Maya, it should work if you use Maya ASCII. If you use Maya binary, it won't work. And the other thing is Maya ASCII, you might be able to recover the file if it ever gets corrupted. It's not something that has happened to me, but I've been told by some very pro artists in the industry that specifically in big studios, if you work with Maya ASCII, it is possible to recover some stuff that might get corrupted. So Maya ASCII is usually better. So I'm just gonna say that, and there we go. Now, yeah. Other than that, just my advice for this first video, what I would recommend you do is just get in here and try to do a couple of little movements here and there. There's actually one exercise that I want you to do. So I'm going to erase my little airplane by just hitting delete. And the little exercise that I want you to do is I want you to use this primitives right here, the sphere, the cube, all of this, to build a little snowman. So I'm just going to create a sphere there. I'm going to create one new here. I'm going to use my scale button. I'm going to make it bigger. I'm going to create a new sphere. I'm going to use W to move it up. So as you can see, I'm combining all the tools that we've just learned, the movement, the scale, the rotation, to create something complex out of something very simple, like this, guys. Let's do the nose, for instance. I'm going to grab this nose right here. I'm going to hit W. I'm going to move this all the way up, and I'm going to scale it to make it smaller. And here's where I could do like a non-uniform scale, for instance, in the Y-axis to make it taller. I'm going to rotate this around. I'm going to place this right here, and there we go. We got a nice little carrot nose. Let's grab it like a cylinder now. I'm going to move it up here, R, and I'm going to make this flatter like this. That's the rim of the hat. I'm going to use a new cylinder. Move it up here. R. I'm going to move it and make it smaller. There we go. And as you can see, we are creating a very nice snowman with very simple tools. By just using our basic shapes, our W, our E, our R's, which are the movement, scale, and rotation, we can create something very, very nice. So this is the first exercise for you guys. It's very simple. I mean, of course, there's no homework for this. You're gonna get as much knowledge as you are gonna put effort into the project. So the more you work and the more exercises you follow along, especially if you're completely new to the 3D world, the easier it's gonna get for you. If you're already new and you already know this basic stuff, then don't worry. Jump ahead a couple of videos and we'll continue from a more exciting point. This is just the basics that I need to show you guys so that everyone knows exactly what we're talking about and can get the job done. So that's it for this video, guys. Hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next one where we discuss the components of the different elements. Bye bye.